Hi, I'm JD, and this week on NASA Now, astronaut Mike Foreman answers some of your questions about being a NASA astronaut. But before we get to that, let's find out what else is happening at NASA Now. NASA has announced the successful activation of new hardware that will support water production services aboard the International Space Station. The new system can create up to 530 gallons of water per year from byproducts of the station's oxygen generation system and carbon dioxide removal assembly. NASA was among the major exhibitors at the USA Science and Engineering Festival held last weekend in the nation's capital. Rocket scientists, engineers, and team members from NASA's education and outreach programs were on hand to engage the public and answer questions about NASA's mission. Now let's take a look back at the past.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
February 20th, 1962. Ohio astronaut John Glenn rockets into history as the first American to orbit Earth. After 4 hours and 56 minutes in flight, his spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere and splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean.
The NASA Now team would like to thank you for all the great feedback that we received on last week's show. Many of you had additional questions for our special guest. So back by popular demand is veteran shuttle astronaut and 5-time spacewalker Mike Foreman.
Growing up in Ohio, we heard a lot about astronauts like John Glenn and Jim Lovell and Neil Armstrong. And so those guys, seeing them on TV and the newspapers inspired me to sort of find out what is this job called astronaut, and it piqued my interest, and I thought, as an 8 or 9-year-old kid, I thought, yeah, this is a cool job, I'd like to do this. I always tell people launch feels like a car wreck a little bit because, if you've ever been rear-ended, at a stop sign, and you know what that jolt back feels like, that whiplash feel. Well, we're laying on our backs, so that we're facing forward as the rocket launches. And it feels like, you just got rear-ended, but it's not an instantaneous thing like at a stop sign. It's 8.5 minutes of this push in the back that's just continuously accelerating. By the end of the 8.5 minutes, you're feeling 3 Gs of force through your chest, which, feels like someone's sitting on your chest. It's becoming hard to breathe, but, it's just a thrill ride the whole way. On my first mission, I sat on the flight deck. I had a great view as a flight engineer up there, looking out all the windows. As we launched, the fireball was reflecting off this cloud layer in front of us. So as we got to about 6,000 feet off the ground, which only took us about 28 seconds, this cloud layer just got brighter and brighter orange. It looked like a wall of fire in front of us almost. And then we just popped through that and it became black again. And it was just amazing. My parents were big inspirations, for me growing up as a kid. I really liked math and science, and my parents, sort of helped me, with my homework and directed me, I think, in that direction a little bit. Told my dad this plan of mine, this 8 or 9-year-old kid, telling your dad, I want to be an astronaut. And he said, well, you ought to look into the Naval Academy. And I said, what's the Naval Academy? And he said, well, it's a school that you could go to, but you do the research. He was smart. He told me, you go find out. So I applied. I studied hard in high school. I got into the Naval Academy. I went there. I studied aerospace engineering because I wanted to be an astronaut. Best decision I ever made was to get this master's degree in aeronautical engineering because I know I wouldn't be an astronaut today if I didn't have that master's degree. Becoming an astronaut was always a dream of mine. It's a very challenging goal to achieve, obviously, because a lot of people want to be astronauts and not everybody gets selected. So for me, flying airplanes in the Navy was a lot of fun. I liked it, so I became very good at it because, if you follow a career path of something that you like, there's a lot more chances that you're going to be successful at it. Hopefully it's the engineering science side because that's where we need people to, understand all these high-tech pieces of equipment that we work with at NASA. If you want to be an astronaut, you like that kind of stuff, find a career in that area and be successful, and then apply to NASA.
Do you have a burning question you'd like to ask astronaut Mike Foreman? Well, if so, check the NASA Explorer School's website for information about a live chat. Coming soon. Mike Foreman is just one of 24 astronauts who were born in the state of Ohio.
Now it's time to check out what's up.
This week, the Space Shuttle Discovery will dock with the International Space Station, making them the brightest objects in the nighttime sky. Depending on your location, the spacecraft's position in orbit, and the time of day, you may be able to see both spacecraft as they orbit about 386 kilometers, or 240 miles above the planet. The linked spacecrafts will appear as a very bright white point of light moving across the sky. To find out when the shuttle and station will be visible in your area, visit the Shuttle and Station section of the NASA portal or the ISS sighting website listed in the Resources section of this NASA Now webpage.
Now it's your turn. Look at this week's resources and activities on the NASA Now homepage.
Today, astronaut Mike Foreman talked about his career path to space. As we learned, reaching his career goals began long before he started college. He had to set goals and make the right choices about his education. This week's activities focus on NASA careers and are designed to help you start thinking about your future. Everything you need to get started can be found in the Resources section of this NASA Now webpage.
Well, that's it for NASA Now. Be sure to tune in next week when we take a closer look at inflatable habitats for the Moon and Mars. We'll see you then on NASA Now.
NASA Now comes to you from the virtual campus at NASA Explorer Schools.